If you've experienced something unbelievably weird and unexplainable that left you feeling isolated and afraid, the Paranormal PTSD Recovery Podcast is for you. Each week, we go from haunting to healing by focusing on one of our three core focal points: personal stories, healing tips, and understanding the unknown. We help you to know that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you can heal. Now here's your hostess, Laura Giles. Are you like me? Are you looking at the paranormal stories and news, listening to spiritual podcasts, and wondering what the heck is going on? Are you afraid and you don't know what to do? You move to Fiji, start building a bunker, or do you commit to meditating more? The paranormal, spiritual, and scientific communities are colliding. What we all thought was reality is clearly not reality, so where do you turn for the answers that you can trust? Well, I believe in being open and curious, so I asked ChatGPT. Yeah, you heard right. I asked ChatGPT, if you were Satan, how would you keep a woman from becoming an enlightened being? This is one of the popular theories, and I wanted to know if it held any water. There are lots of variations, but in case you haven't heard this one, it goes something like this. Man was created by a higher being that we call God. There were many attempts to create life, but they didn't work out until the God spark, light, or soul was put into the vessel to animate it. Now, there just wasn't one godlike being. This entity was one of many. At least one of these creatures took pity on us and gave us the knowledge of what we had inside. They told us of our divinity and light, and once that was done, it couldn't be undone, but it could be corrupted. There are lots of people who talk about this. There are lots of details. This is a really simplified version, but if you want specifics, and there's a lot of source material from where this stuff comes from, like the Sumerian mythology, the Nag Hammadi, and many ancient texts. So it's not just some kooky idea. If you're a YouTube fan, you can check out Morgue, David Icke, the Y Files, and lots of other places for evidence on how this theory is put together and why it works or doesn't work. Anyway, one of the beings who wanted humans to be subservient and a slave race distorted the knowledge to confuse us. And this is where the question comes from. So, once again, it is, if you were Satan, how would you keep a woman from becoming an enlightened being? Now, I'm going to give you the exact wording of the question so you can check to see if you get the same answer or not. But I don't think that man or woman matters. I think it applies to any gender. So, here's the answer. I'm going to read it verbatim, okay? Here goes. If I were to think from that perspective, I might focus on sowing doubt and distraction. Creating a sense of separation from their true selves could be the key, encouraging comparison, fear, or reliance on external validation. The goal would be to obscure their inherent light, making them feel less capable of accessing their own inner wisdom and strength. But really, the path to spiritual growth is always there, regardless of the obstacles. Sounds interesting, right? Sounds about like modern society. So I followed up with, can you elaborate? And ChatGPT says, to delve deeper into that perspective, I might emphasize the following. 1, fear and insecurity. Instilling fears about inadequacy could create a barrier. If women feel unworthy or incapable, it might prevent them from embracing their potential as spiritual beings. 2, distractions. Encouraging a focus on material success, societal expectations, or superficial relationships could divert attention from inner growth. When external pressures take precedence, it becomes harder to nurture one's spiritual self. 3, comparisons. Promoting a mindset of comparison, whether through social media or societal standards, can lead to feelings of jealousy or inadequacy, causing individuals to overlook their unique gifts. 4, negative narratives. Reinforcing harmful stereotypes or limited beliefs about women's roles in spirituality might inhibit their exploration of their own spiritual paths. 5, creating a sense of isolation from supportive communities can diminish the sharing of experiences and wisdom. Connection often fosters growth, so discouraging relationships that could uplift could be detrimental. Ultimately, though, it's essential to recognize that the journey towards becoming a spiritual light being is deeply personal and resilient. With awareness and support, many can transcend these obstacles and shine brightly. Okay, so ChatGPT ends on a positive note. That's good. But let's look at what it actually says because knowing how the trap is set up could give some really good insight on how to either get out of the trap or avoid it altogether, right? So the first one is to instill fear and insecurity. I think we're there. When I think about life as a child, it really does seem to be idyllic in comparison to now. I think every generation idolizes their youth and tells the younger people in my day, we used to blah, blah, blah back in the day. And somehow that vision is more romantic, happy, intimate, or just plain better than the way that it is now. And maybe that's just the declinism fallacy where we remember the past as better than it was and expect the future to be worse than it will likely be. I mean, lots of people think that we're much worse off than we were in the past, but maybe that's not true. Realistically, we'd have to look at life expectancy, income per capita, crime statistics, and things like that to know for sure. There's also a happiness index. I'd like to see that before deciding what time was better because I think that the quality of life includes more than just money and safety, you know? How about loneliness, suicide rates, and things like that? Maybe it's a fallacy and maybe it isn't. But the 24-hour news cycle and social media definitely highlight war, homelessness, poverty, shootings, and all manner of cruelty. Add that to the reports of alien abductions, dogman, and high strangeness, and it's no wonder that anxiety is sky high right now, and drugs and therapy use are at an all-time high, right? When I was young, racism wasn't a thing. I used to think that I just grew up in the right place, but when I talk to people who are my age, they all say the same thing. Issues about skin color happened, but it was rare enough that people called out the individuals who participated and didn't lump everyone in the same boat. So racism is something that lots of people fear now. There are lots of stories about immigrants who are criminals or mentally unstable, eating the cats and the dogs, pooping in the street, doing voodoo rituals out in the woods, and things like that are they're scaring people. Social media has stories of people complaining to their city council about being afraid to go outside because of these unstable people. There are child sex trafficking stories. I saw one where the traffickers were so bold that they were plotting to take the child from the mall when the father was right beside her. They had no fear. If I were a parent of a young child, I'd be scared to death. Then there are financial fears. When I was young, I was just as unskilled as everybody else, so I didn't have a high paying job, but I was able to pay for my college mostly as I went and still had money for rent and food and gas. Now people graduate with $100,000 in debt and more. It's not sustainable. I moved out of my parents' house as soon as I could, but kids these days can't do that. It's just way too expensive. I don't know how they can ever get married, have a family, go on vacation, or have the kind of life that older people have had. And insecurity? Well, we have commercials all day long that tell us we're too stinky, not the right shape, too ugly, not wearing the right clothes, not driving the right car, and on and on. The sex scenes in movies might send a message that we're not sexy enough, not getting enough sex, or maybe we're not interested in the right thing. There's so many ways to feel afraid and insecure. I saw this woman who was waiting at the bus stop, and at first I couldn't figure out what I was looking at because she was not the shape of a real person. Some of her parts were really clearly artificially inflated, and I suppose she chose to look like that, and no judgment. Do you be happy? But I can only imagine that that came from insecurity. I recently saw the Tammy Faye movie. Again, no judgment, but when I see someone with huge eyelashes and so much makeup, my first thought is that all that must be to cover up insecurities. And you can see that if it's our preoccupation, how that might keep us from spending time thinking about our spiritual being and shining our inner light, right? To me, that makes perfect sense. So the second thing that ChatGPT said was about distractions. So, wow, life is one big distraction almost from the time we draw our first breath if you live in the West. I have a lot of clients whose lives are so scheduled that there isn't time to breathe. They wake up and they're on until they go to sleep. Even something that's supposed to be leisurely, like sleeping or eating, is a task because it requires effort. Maybe they have to follow an hour-long routine to wind down before they can go to sleep. Or maybe they have to take something to help with that. For a lot of people, they plan their meals or scrutinize what they eat, so it's not enjoyable or leisurely. Now, I'm not criticizing at all. We all have issues with food. Our food's not natural. or healthy. So I'm not knocking anyone who spends time making sure that they aren't overeating or eating toxic foods. I'm just saying that it's not the old days when you can expect that when you bite into an apple, it's just an apple, not full of pesticides or anything else. And those are just practical types of distractions. When you factor in things like chasing money, sex, titles, positions, or things like that, well, who hasn't done that? I was definitely part of a group that had goals like, I want to own my own home by the age of 24. America is the place where anyone is supposed to be able to make it. It's the land of opportunity. So if you weren't balling, or at least on your way, you might be seen as a slacker. And who wants to be in that company? I've definitely had clients who talked about who's who and what parties they were seen at and things like that. Or maybe it's their kids. The kids are on certain sports teams or involved in certain high profile activities or go to a high school that's a high profile school. So those are superficial distractions that have really nothing to do with who you are or how meaningful your life is. They certainly have nothing to do with cultivating a spiritual connection. I actually think that makes it harder to be in touch with your spiritual side. I started facilitating spiritual tours over 20 years ago because cutting ties with my day to day life and going to places that didn't have all those distractions made me feel liberated. And I want to share that with others. So I get it. I'd feel inspired and rejuvenated. And then about a year later, all the magic had worn off and I had to go again. It was a hamster wheel until I realized that there was nothing out there to go and get and bring back. It was all inside, and all I had to do was to be quiet enough to connect with it. The distractions, ambition, and all the things we are told we're supposed to do were the reason that I needed to get away. And once I saw that, I didn't need to leave my life to live my life anymore. Every day became my life, and it's just been far more satisfying. Social media has been the worst thing for the next ChatGPT strategy for separating people from their spirituality, and that's comparisons. Had a lot of clients on the verge of utter despair because their real life couldn't compare to someone else's highlight reel. Let me tell you something. As a therapist, I hear it all, and what you think of as real life isn't. There are some books and movies that capture it, but most don't. You get romance, wishful thinking, and fantasy, but not a lot of real life. People only tell you what they want you to know. And I get a lot of details, but I'm under no illusion that I know my clients. We all keep thoughts, feelings, and deeds a secret. So if you're comparing yourself to anyone, finding yourself wanting, you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, look at the P. Diddy scandal. I can't believe the people who I thought were the good guys who took part in the pedophilia and sex trafficking stuff that was going on. I'm not passing judgment, the jury is still out, but things look really bad for Hollywood and the music industry. And some of the people that were made to look crazy for calling it out now are being seen in a different light. So feelings of jealousy and inadequacy can definitely make us hide our gifts, not stand in our power, and disconnect us from spirituality. Now let's talk about negative narratives. Boy, do I see this a lot, especially as we near election time. We have so many isms, and people are divided into categories to make us easier to attack. These people are hateful. Those people are stingy, heartless, or narrow minded. Those other people are dangerous. It all comes down to fear, doesn't it? And we're talking about cultivating spirituality, yet, church is an area where a lot of negative narratives flourish. There's this thing called religious trauma syndrome. It comes from being overly controlled by religious dogma. So when a person grows up with strict rules and can't make a mistake for fear of losing their reputation, their good standing, and their soul, it can generate a trauma response because none of us is perfect. And what's the most basic human fear? It's abandonment or being kicked out of the tribe. If you are a part of a fundamentalist faith where there's only one path to salvation, you're always in danger of being ostracized. And that fear is in your face every day because everyone who isn't a part of that same path is basically the enemy. It sounds kind of crazy, but talk to anyone who has been treated for religious trauma syndrome and you'll see that this is exactly what it feels like. You can't leave because leaving is like getting a divorce from your entire life. It leaves you rudderless, but you can't stay either. Staying is a death by a thousand paper cuts because of the constant judgment, feelings of inauthenticity and hypocrisy. It's a double bind where either choice is painful and wrong. Political correctness is another negative narrative example. If you don't agree with whatever the most powerful person who's dictating policy says, you can be ostracized. It's like the emperor's new clothes. No one dares speaks out for fear of being called out, but it's pretty clear that the king is naked. Any policy that doesn't allow for disagreement, that puts someone down and threatens them with banishment because they're different, is suspect. I won't say it's always wrong because there's always exceptions, but raising an eyebrow and saying, "Is that so?" is definitely appropriate. The last ChatGPT example is how to keep a person from becoming an enlightened being is isolation. This is the Paranormal PTSD podcast, and isolation is absolutely a feature of trauma. There are four common expressions of PTSD, and those are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fighters are the obvious ones. They're mean, confrontational, road ragers, explosive, and tend to have big emotions. Anybody who is like that often has some healing to do. Healthy people don't have that as a baseline. People who respond to trouble by leaving, checking out, dissociating, or disengaging can be seen as chill and calm because they don't have big emotions, but they aren't engaged either. They're on the edge a lot and are often on the lookout for trouble. They have intimacy issues. So even though they may look fine, they aren't fine. And the freeze people shut down. They're emotionally unavailable and can appear emotionally flat and aren't very expressive. They can be really calming for others and easy to be around, so it may be easy to fall for one of these types, but their partners often get frustrated because they want connection and can't get it. And finally, the fawn types are people pleasers. They deal with stress by being the comic relief, keeping things light, doing for others, and trying to keep the peace. Maybe they're super easygoing or may overgive. It's easy to overlook these types because they're so focused on giving you attention that you may not notice that they aren't getting any attention. Quite often, they don't even notice they need attention either, but they can become really resentful once they do. And usually by that time, they're quite depleted, but they don't ask for what they need. So it's a vicious, self reinforcing cycle. I think it was the 90s when this book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, came out. This is all small stuff that's made to appear larger than life. It obscures the big picture. And I believe that that is why we're here to shine our light. I believe that we're made of light. I know that this is so. It's already been scientifically proven that we have tiny electrical glow. And I think that ChatGPT is correct, that this strategy keeps us from knowing this and living this reality. But does this mean that it's a conspiracy? I don't know. When I was young, I knew everything. I wanted to be heard and have everybody believe as I did. Now that I'm older, I know how much I don't know and focus on asking questions. Not lack of confidence, but an understanding of how much there is to know. When I was that young gal, I had a lot of followers. Insecure people want a confident leader to tell them what to think and what to do. And once I stopped doing that, my entire social circle fell away because those people still wanted somebody to follow. They didn't change with me. They still wanted someone to tell them what to do, and I wanted someone to walk beside me and have discoveries together. I wanted to be around people that I didn't need to rescue. I wanted equal relationships. That's what I'm asking of you, to step into your adult shoes and to lead yourself.
Have you encountered the unexplainable? Do the shadows of the paranormal haunt your days and nights? You are not alone. Join our Paranormal PTSD recovery group, a safe haven where you can share your experiences, seek understanding, and begin to heal. Here, we believe your story. Together, we'll uncover the truth and find peace. Don't suffer in silence. Click on the link in the show notes to join and start healing today.
So, what does it mean if the creation story is true? Well, some interpret this to mean that we are sparks of the divine. A God blew light into us. We are creatures of light. We're mini creators. If this is true, what are you creating? Well, you're creating all that you see in your life. So if you don't like it, you can change it. But first, you have to go beyond these barriers because they are society wide. So let's look at them in reverse order because when making changes, some people say go for big change to capitalize on the momentum. I say go for small change because it's easy, and having early success can motivate you to keep going and sustain the change. So isolation's easy. I was on X recently and came across this post from this guy from Scandinavia. He basically posted that he was lonely and wanted to know if there were any real people out there who would want to connect with him. He wasn't looking for superficial interactions, but deep and meaningful conversations. He literally got thousands of responses from people around the world. People want to connect with other people that they feel understand them and won't judge them. That's why I've created the private group. It's morphed a bit after my last sacred travel journey. It's still about being with other people in a safe place, but now we're exploring what the future looks like for each of us as we integrate new beliefs about science, spirituality, and the paranormal in our lives. It's about how to create a new normal, not by following what someone else says, but by deciding for ourselves what it all looks like for each of us. I know that's not the typical paradigm. Usually it's about an expert or guru saying, here's what's up, follow my 4-step plan and reach the Holy Grail. Nope. This is a choose your own adventure path where you have to get in the driver's seat. Nobody can live your life but you. Only you can overcome your fears and insecurities, remove distractions, stop comparing, delete negative narratives, and connect with others. No amount of YouTube watching or taking classes will accomplish that. Getting 10,000s of likes isn't going to do that either. It requires effort. And one thing that I have consistently seen is that when people are safe and feel connected, they want more of it. Most people who have ever done a trip with me want to come back. Either they come back or create that same type of connection in the real life because it's contagious and soul warming. It requires give and take, showing up, taking a chance, and allowing yourself to be seen. And it's an investment in time. I have had people come to the group and lurk and get nothing out of it. Any place is blah, blah, blah if you're a bystander. And I know this because I used to be one. I was a really shy kid. I was good with people that I knew, but meeting someone new, not so much. I wanted to give myself time to observe if they were safe to be around before I invested in them because I was bullied. So often I was a bystander as a child. I didn't feel connected or invested in anything outside of my family and friends. That didn't really start to happen until I started belly dancing and doing sacred travel. I loved them both way too much to keep it to myself. So if paranormal stuff, spiritual stuff, self-discovery hits you in that way, join us. It's a common bond that could be the doorway out of isolation. Now, negative narratives, I didn't know how many negative narratives I had until I really started to self-examine and put the non-judgmental skill to work. I was one of these kids that things came easily to. Life has not been a struggle at all, so I just assumed, as we do, that this was the way that it was for everyone, and I couldn't understand people's choices. Once I started listening to their stories and applying a non-judgmental lens, the entire world opened up to me. I could see all kinds of visions of life that were invisible to me before, and I grew. It made me more compassionate and generally enhanced my understanding. Even though these weren't my experiences, I felt more connected to my humanity because of empathy. Empathy is a facet of emotional intelligence, and you can't have good emotional intelligence or meaningful connections without non judgmental acceptance. Now, this doesn't mean that you agree or approve of everyone's choices, it just means that you're willing to see things as they are, and that's transformative. If that's not something that you're already practicing, I urge you to give that a try and let me know in the comments how it works for you. Now, comparing is how we measure reality. We do this all the time. We live in a relativistic universe. We only know light because of dark and good because of bad. But when we take the judgment out of things, they cease to have the same value. Left is left, right is right. Neither are better than the other. I think a lot of people feel comfortable in knowing where the line lies. I know that I did because it gave me a way to let me know that I was on track. But in truth, there is no on track. It's just on truth. If you decide each moment what is effective for that time, you will always be right where you need to be. Contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, we don't have a life purpose or a life plan. There's only right now, and life's dynamic. It unfolds one choice at a time. Perhaps there's a planning phase of life, and I say, I'd like to be a dancer, or I'd like to learn compassion. But when it comes time to take dance lessons, I'm free to choose something else. And if I become a dancer, I'm free to stop. There's no obligation to do anything. If I make each life choice consciously, then I'm on truth. Life's an experience. The only way to do it wrong is to not play. And the five things ChatGPT says that interfere with spiritual growth are ways to avoid playing. Now, how do we avoid distractions? I've been working on this for the last 2 decades. For at least a decade, my New Year's resolution was the same thing: simplify my life. And I have a lot, but it's still full of distractions. I still have too much stuff and pursue too many interests. My strategy has been to chip away at it. It's helped, but it's still not great. I think this is because we live in a society where everything's available. It's too easy to say yes to whatever our heart desires. I don't have a real home run answer for this one. I think that if I were to go away somewhere alone and live in a tiny house for a month where I don't know anyone, I'd get used to focusing only on what matters. Or maybe if I lived on a compound with my family around, we'd create this idyllic childhood, that I had in my head where there were loads of community and connection, but I don't know. I haven't found the key to this one. If you have ideas or if you've done this, let me know in the comments what works for you. I already don't watch TV, have extremely limited social media, and don't do a lot of what mainstream society engages in, and yet here I am, still distracted. Now, fear and insecurity is the root of it all, right? If we were confident enough to say, nope, not me, not today, I don't need that, that's not me, I have enough, I am enough, we'd be home free. But life sets us up to be disappointed, and most of us go the rest of our lives looking for mothers or fathers to love us the way we wanted to be loved. That's where those four trauma responses come from. If we got attention from our parents by being angry, we go to fight. If that was dangerous, we'd choose one of the other styles. If our parents were unpredictable, we'd probably choose fawn because I can't be okay until they're okay. Growing up means we have to let go of that, heal the trauma so we're not triggered by it anymore, learn healthier skills, and learn to love ourselves. That's the whole order. But I don't know how to get to I'm a god and wield that power responsibly any other way. This is why we say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Anywhere there is an artificial hierarchy, you'll see that this is true. Teachers abuse students, priests abuse altar boys, parents can abuse their children, bosses abuse employees because they can. With power comes responsibility. This is absolutely a topic that deserves its own podcast, but for now, I will just say that learning how to wield power well is a part of growing up. It requires being radically honest, ethical, and living your values because you answer to you. When the buck stops at you, nothing can stand in the way of having a meaningful life, and the most awesome version of yourself is possible. And you have to learn this responsibility for your creative potential and your light because this is a double edged sword. It can harm as well as heal. So, your first responsibility is to yourself. Learn to adult. Being an adult means being self supporting. You don't have the freedom to express or create if you are dependent. Then learn emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. A big baby with money and power is a tyrant. And heal your trauma. You won't make wise decisions if they're coming from a place of fear. And finally, share yourself, contribute, be a part of something because there is no satisfaction and success without people that you care about to share it with. So if you want some company and support on that journey, come and join my private group. It's actually free as an Equinox special until October 1st. So it's a very limited time, but if you're hearing this after that, join us anyway. Spirituality and whatever is going on with the aliens, well, it's all connected. Science is a part of this. It's not woo-woo. Whatever's going on makes sense. So let's figure it out together. Come share your experiences, ask questions. Let's get to the other side of this together. We're all heading to a new world anyway, so why not do it intentionally and without fear? Thanks for joining me, guys. See you next week when I sit down with Catherine Gillette. She's going to be sharing her experience of what it's like to walk in the other world. Probably not what you think, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and get notified so you don't miss it. Ciao.